Discover the incredible truth to transform your ambition into action forever. Sarah sat in the cramped library corner, a thin layer of dust clinging to her thoughts like the heavy air of the Chicago afternoon. Before her lay a stack of finance textbooks, each one promising a better future. The weight on her shoulders, however, was anything but light. 2 jobs to make ends meet while raising her young son not only consumed her time, but swallowed whole her dreams. She gazed out the window, watching the gray clouds swirl, mirroring her chaotic emotions. Finance analyst, a title that danced on the edges of her mind. You in finance? Echoed the laughter of friends and family, dismissing her ambition as folly. As she contemplated the dreariness of her reality, a voice pulled her from her spiraling thoughts. You look like you're carrying the world. An elderly man, dressed in a faded cardigan, offered a kind smile. He introduced himself as Mr. Hawthorne, a retired professor of economics. Their conversation ignited something within her, a spark of hope. She shared her dream of breaking into the finance world, eyes gleaming with the fire of aspiration she had let die too many times. "Why not pursue it?" he asked softly. His genuine interest made her chest tighten. Could she risk it? Night classes would mean less time with her son and more strain on her already fraying nerves. Still, the idea of learning and growing felt like a breath of fresh air. The next day she enrolled, determination surging through her veins. The reality, however, hit her like a train. As she entered the classroom, a jumble of anxious teenagers filled the seats around her, their laughter mingling with the whispers of doubt that clung to Sarah like a second skin. The pressure of fitting in while juggling parental duties felt overwhelming. Each time she coaxed her brain into studying, guilt twisted her stomach. Should she be home helping her father or playing with her son? She sank into a cycle of comparative misery, questioning her worth, her dreams, her very place in this new world. Before she could settle into despair, the pressure escalated dangerously. One fellow student, Lisa, seemed unnaturally fixated on her, hurling subtle insults and uninvited critiques during group projects. It was a repeat of her childhood. The whispers of self-doubt crept back in, clawing at her spirit. Was she delusional to think she belonged here? In a moment of defeat, Sarah retreated to her home, stumbling upon a forgotten box in the attic, filled with her family's dusty financial records. With trembling hands, she unfolded life stories of resilience, of sacrifices larger than she had ever realized. Her grandparents had fought for a future that she now wielded the power to craft. The anguish of their struggles turned into a burning resolve within her chest. She clutched the papers tightly, knowing she had to fight, not just for herself, but for her family's legacy. As the pressure mounted, shadows of self-doubt intensified. Then came the email about the local financial competition, a chance to showcase her abilities to the world. Heart racing, she envisioned herself standing at the podium, her throat tightening. What if she flopped? The crowd would be judging, but it wasn't just her battle anymore. Her family's sacrifices loomed over her like storm clouds. Would she let their history drown her hopes? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The moment was here, the podium looming ahead like a gaping mouth. Sarah's insecurities churned violently as she wrestled with the truth she held. The path to liberation and the burden of her responsibilities hung in balance. She inhaled sharply, the doubts butting against her courage. Could she reveal the passion within her, or would it be snuffed out, buried beneath the weight of obligation? All eyes on her, she opened her mouth, but the sound of silence was deafening. Would the next words she spoke build a bridge to her dreams or collapse under the weight of her fears? In that tense moment, Sarah felt time stretch into eternity. The expectant faces in the audience blurred, their gazes piercing through her skin, revealing every doubt she had ever felt. A part of her wished to retreat, to dissolve into the shadows where self-doubt thrived. Yet, buried deep within was a flicker of defiance, a whisper that urged her to reclaim her narrative. After what felt like hours, Sarah found her voice. "I stand before you not merely as a student, but as a daughter, a mother, and a woman who refuses to let the past dictate her future." The words tumbled out, urgent and raw. She could feel the weight of her family's legacy resting firmly on her shoulders, but instead of crumbling beneath it, something ignited inside her, a call to action, an invitation to rise. She launched into her presentation, her metrics and strategies flowing with a clarity that surprised her. She spoke about resilience, not just in numbers, but in the heart, weaving her family's struggles into the fabric of her argument. The room shifted, the audience leaning in, captivated by her sincerity. For the first time, Sarah felt the thrill of confidence coursing through her, buoying her insecurities. But in the back of her mind, a darker shadow lurked. What would happen if she succeeded? The thought anchored her, challenging her to confront an equally powerful fear, not just failure, but the responsibility that came with success. As her final slide illuminated the screen, she paused, the echo of her family's sacrifices weighing heavily in the air. "This is more than a competition. This is my history, my chance to honor it." Perhaps this realization could bridge her dual worlds, the mother and the aspiring analyst. The liberating warmth of vulnerability surged in her chest, propelling her beyond the confines of her previous self. The applause came thunderously, somewhat dazed, yet exhilarating. Sarah stepped away from the podium, breathing deeply, relief washing over her. Maybe she belonged here. Perhaps she could carve out a space that stretched across her personal and professional lives. In that moment, Lisa's cutting remarks felt trivial, mere echoes of a fear she had begun to dismantle. Strength was a choice, and for once, Sarah had chosen to embrace it. But as she gathered her things, the applause came thunderously, somewhat dazed, yet exhilarating. Sarah stepped away from the podium, breathing deeply, relief washing over her. Maybe she belonged here. Perhaps she could carve out a space that stretched across her personal and professional lives. In that moment, Lisa's cutting remarks felt trivial, mere echoes of a fear she had begun to dismantle. Strength was a choice, and for once, Sarah had chosen to embrace it. But as she gathered her things, the lingering questions resurfaced. What if the competition led to an internship, a full-time job, all expectations and pressures imposed on her to succeed? She felt the tug of her responsibilities waiting at home, her son, her father, dependent on her every decision. Days rolled into a cycle post-competition, and the email announcing the winners arrived. Heart racing, she clicked, taking a deep breath. When her name flickered on the screen alongside the first-place title, thunderous joy and crushing panic surged together, rising like a tempest within her. "I won," she whispered to herself, disbelief clouding her thoughts. The weight of victory threatened to sink her. It wasn't just a recognition of her achievements. It was a doorway to a future laden with expectations. Would she be able to navigate this new reality without losing herself in the process? With newfound determination, Sarah decided she would not let this opportunity slip through her fingers. Instead, she would seize it, rallying every ounce of grit her ancestors had embodied. Yet, beneath the promise of her victory lay an unsettling truth. Her family's history of sacrifice pushed her forward, while the fear of failing them clung closely. If she was to step further into the finance world, her fear would need to become a tool, not a chain. As she prepared for the next chapter ahead, her mind wandered to the possibilities. The real test lay not just in achieving her dreams, but in embodying the legacy she sought to uphold. Would she find ways to honor both ambition and responsibility? Uneasiness settled in her stomach as she initiated the next round of courses and internships, remembering her past fears of inadequacy. The time had come to face not just the world outside, but the turmoil within me. Would she face the truth of her strengths and vulnerabilities, or would she let the chaos in her heart dictate her path? The answer was waiting to unfold. The moment arrived when Sarah needed to confront her evolving identity. She stood at the threshold of the finance landscape she had longed to enter. Yet the mix of anticipation and trepidation was suffocating. Each step toward her next courses and internships felt heavy with expectation, hers and others. As she delved deeper into her studies, every financial analysis required of her became a mirror reflecting not only her competence but also her insecurities. Her initial excitement began to blur into a cycle of intense self-scrutiny. The first question during her cohort's weekly discussions, "How do you plan to address the market volatility that's influenced our economic predictions?" triggered a flash of doubt. Her peers articulated bravely, citing real-time data and market strategies with the confidence of seasoned professionals. Sarah felt stripped bare, her spontaneous thoughts retreating into a cacophony of fear. What if she failed to contribute anything meaningful? As she sat in front of her laptop that night, fingers poised over the keyboard, she fought the urge to close the screen and turn away from the impending discomfort. The familiar voice of self-doubt hissed in her ear. "What do you know about volatility? You're just a mother from a small town." It felt insurmountable, yet the memory of her podium speech sparked a flicker of resilience. Deciding to battle her chaos head-on, Sarah plunged into research, devouring case studies and analysis reports until the words blurred. She mapped out her perspective, a unique blend of maternal instinct interwoven with professional ambitions, which could offer insights into risk management. The very next day, armed with newfound determination, she shared her viewpoints with her cohort. The shift was palpable as she spoke, her voice steadied by conviction and clarity. Risk is not merely numbers, it's also about understanding human behavior and societal impact, she articulated, feeling the room's energy respond to her once muted voice. Weeks passed, and Sarah began examining her experiences as assets rather than liabilities. She found that leveraging her background enriched discussions, opening dialogues about values that transcended numbers. She proposed strategies that integrated ethical considerations into investment plans, addressing the psychological dimensions of market behavior. Each conversation chipped away at her insecurities, building a newfound confidence within her professional persona. However, the feedback was not universally positive. A few of her classmates seemed annoyed by the emotional angle she incorporated. "Finance is about rational decision-making, not anecdotes," Lisa remarked coldly during one heated discussion, clicking her pen impatiently. The damning dismissiveness clawed at Sarah's confidence momentarily. She felt the weight of her family's expectations resurface. Was she venturing too far into personal reckoning instead of focusing solely on the numbers? But as Sarah mulled over the criticism, she recognized a turning point. This tension between emotional intelligence and data-driven decision-making could become her strength. Perhaps the expectations placed on her weren't chains, but weights to anchor her deep insights. The internal struggle refined her ambition, challenging her to navigate paths where logical reasoning and authentic narrative intertwined. With each class, she learned to embrace constructive criticism. She began seeking out mentors, professors who shared her interest in behavioral finance, emotional investing, and ethical considerations in economic models. This fostered an exciting inner dialogue on where her identity as a woman and mother could coexist harmoniously with her developing professional persona. Still, uncertainties loomed. How long could Sarah balance the tide of familial expectations without losing herself? The upcoming internship opportunities would not only shape her career, but also demand a consolidation of her conflicting worlds. Her heart raced at the thought of finalizing her choices. Would she succumb to the traditional paths that felt more comfortable yet stale, or would she carve a niche marrying intuition with analytics? The looming decisions were like shadows stretching over her choices. Would the courage she discovered carry her forth, even when faced with opposition? As she prepared to take that next significant leap into her internship applications, a spark ignited within. She would not just navigate these waters, she would redefine them. But the internal conflict simmered beneath the surface, demanding resolution. What would it take to merge her ambitions seamlessly with her values? She closed her laptop, grappling with the budding awareness that the real journey was just beginning. As Sarah approached the deadline for her internship applications, her mind buzzed with a mixture of excitement and dread. Each time she stared at the blank entry forms, the weight of her previous doubts rallied around her once again, whispering scenarios of failure and embarrassment. Yet a recent revelation burned in her chest. She had an approach that many in her field lacked, the ability to blend personal narrative with hard data. Slowly, that realization became her anchor as she began to construct her applications. She sat at the wooden kitchen table, veins pulsing with both adrenaline and anxiety. The soft morning light streaming through the window, illuminating the papers scattered around her. With a deep breath, she refocused her mind on her unique perspective. Each experience as a mother, each conversation, was not just a story. It was a lesson in human behavior, resilience, and adaptability, traits that defined both her and every investor she intended to influence. The first application beckoned. The firm, renowned for its innovative use of psychological insights in financial services, felt like the perfect fit. Instead of succumbing to the urge to present herself in the mold of the traditional finance applicant, numbers only, no emotions, she opted to lead with her story. As she typed, her narrative took shape. It was not just about numbers for her. It was about understanding what drove those numbers: people, families, dreams. But with each keystroke, a nagging voice questioned her choice. Is this too personal? What if they see it as irrelevant? Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, paralyzed for a moment. In that pause was a battle between authenticity and fear. She had to choose which side to embrace. The truth was, her personal experiences were her strongest asset. They were the very reasons she had entered this field. After a long consideration, Sarah pressed on. The moment she hit submit, a wave of exhilaration and vulnerability washed over her. She had bared a piece of herself to strangers. The tightness in her chest evaporated, replaced by a lightness that felt foreign yet thrilling. Each application she completed felt like a reclamation of her power. As the days passed, notifications from the firms trickled in. Some rejections came painfully, a blunt reminder of the competitive landscape. Each no felt like an ember to her self-doubt, but she fought back stronger. She reframed every rejection as data, a chance to iterate and improve her presentation. Could she make her narrative even more compelling? What additional insights could she share? Each setback became a springboard, driving her determination deeper. Meanwhile, the tension lingered at home. Her family noticed her late nights and fabled enthusiasm for finance. Conversations veered curiously toward her choices, and although her loved ones offered support, Sarah felt a flicker of disconnection. "Why can't you just stick to what you know?" her brother asked one evening, his brow furrowing with concern. It was a sentiment echoed in the subtext of her mother's worried glances. It stung and filled her with a growing resolve. She no longer wanted to be confined by their definitions of success. She began to assert her vision, sharing more about her progress with them. The momentum shifted. She sought their understanding, inviting them into her world of finance rather than pushing them away. Each conversation became an opportunity to explain why she was pursuing this, framing her ambitions as also an endeavor to improve their future together, ensuring they'd benefit from her journey. Then came the email she had waited for, a virtual interview invitation. Her pulse quickened, not from anxiety, but excitement. This opportunity could be a breakthrough. This was her moment to convey her vision, her belief in merging finance with human understanding. As she prepared, however, nerves began to crack her confidence anew. What if she stumbled? What if they didn't see her vision the same way she did? Did she truly belong in this arena, or was she merely masquerading as someone competent? Determined to confront her anxieties head-on, she reviewed her notes, practiced her responses, and visualized success. The dialogue swirling in her mind crystallized. Those moments she once viewed as liabilities were her greatest strengths, crafting a future where rationality and emotional intellect coexisted seamlessly. As the day of the interview dawned, Sarah felt a strange calm settling within her. This was not merely a challenge, but a chance for her to embrace every part of who she was: mother, student, evolving professional. The soft knock at her door broke her focus just as she fiddled with her resume, letting her nerves bubble back up. It was her daughter, holding a drawing. "Mommy, look, you can do it!" The innocence and unwavering belief in her child's eyes ignited something in Sarah. The realization that it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about paving a path for their combined futures. With her heart aligned to her purpose, she took a deep breath, ready to face whatever was about to unfold. And as she clicked the link to enter the online meeting, she knew she was not just stepping into an interview. She was stepping into a defining moment of her life, ready to challenge every preconception. What would be revealed? What path might this interview carve for her future? The screen flickered to life, revealing a conference room bathed in bright light from a large window. A panel of 3 interviewers appeared, their faces warm yet scrutinizing. Names floated beneath their images, each one a stranger, yet momentarily tethered to Sarah's ambitions. Just as the initial introductions began, her resolve wavered momentarily, a familiar anxiety surfacing. Would they truly appreciate her unique perspective or dismiss it as irrelevant whims? "Good morning, Sarah," the lead interviewer, a woman in her 40s with sharp features and an inviting smile, began. "We've read through your application, and we're intrigued by your approach to finance. We'd like to hear more about that." Taking a deep breath, Sarah felt the comfortable push of her daughter's drawing still lingering somewhere in her mind, a brief reminder of purpose and innocence. This was her moment. She had studied, reflected, and found a narrative to embody. "Thank you for this opportunity. I believe finance is not just about numbers, it's about the stories behind them. Understanding human behavior is key," she shared, her voice steady. As she delved into her response, weaving personal insights with professional aspirations, Sarah could see their interest shift. One interviewer leaned in, a spark of curiosity in her gaze. Sally, she recalled from the introduction, began to probe deeper. "Can you elaborate on how your experiences as a mother influence your insights into this industry?" The question caught Sarah slightly off guard, yet it ignited a powerful stream of thoughts. For years, she had balanced the complexities of nurturing while striving for professionalism. Suddenly, the stories flooded in. A young child's need for security resonated with investors' desires for stability and growth. "Understanding my daughter's developmental needs taught me to view individuals not as mere account numbers, but as families with dreams," she confidently articulated. With each exchange, the nerves dissipated. Sarah navigated their questions with a newfound agility, reasserting her strengths, reframing past failures as learning opportunities. The interview flowed more like a conversation among colleagues than a formal evaluation, the energy shifting toward collaboration rather than competition. Here she was, beyond her labels, just a person sharing insights from both sides of the table. Yet as the dialogue reached its peak, so did her internal conflict. Did she truly belong in this space? Just as she was pondering her worth, a sharp question pierced through her thoughts. "Sarah, you speak highly of merging emotional intellect with finance. However, How will you handle the pressure of a high-stakes environment where decisions are often purely data-driven? The question lingered uncomfortably, a challenge hanging in the air. A kernel of doubt emerged, reigniting fears of inadequacy. What if they think I'm soft? What if I can't stand my ground when She felt the familiar grip of anxiety. She felt the familiar grip of anxiety creeping in, but pushed against it. Drawing strength from her earlier reflections, Sarah needed to ground herself. "I believe that data is most effective when it serves human needs," she replied, the words tumbling out with growing conviction. "When I see numbers and graphs, I see families, and that motivates me to understand the best strategies that benefit not just portfolios, but lives." The panel exchanged glances, their eyes alight with deeper comprehension. Just then, she noticed their receptive demeanor transforming into something softer as they nodded. As the interview came to a close, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had not only shared her vision, but had also transformed her anxiety into something productive. She had reinforced her stance, claiming her space within an industry that seemed ready to acknowledge her unique strengths. "Thank you for your time, Sarah. We see potential in your approach," the lead interviewer concluded, a hint of enthusiasm lacing her voice. As Sarah exited the call, a swell of thoughts coursed through her, apprehension twisted with undeniable excitement. This experience was not merely an evaluation, it was a reclamation of her identity, an assertion that her narrative mattered in the world of finance. With her heart pounding, the elation of possibility filled her lungs. Yet, amidst the exhilaration, a nagging feeling lingered. What if this was just the beginning? As she replayed the questions, another dimension of anxiety emerged. In that moment, she realized the path ahead might require more than just innovative ideas. It needed resilience against skepticism and outright rejection from an industry not ready for her blend of narrative and data. Her journey was far from over. What would she discover next about herself as she prepared for what would inevitably be an even steeper hill to climb? The following morning, Sarah woke to the sun filtering through the curtains, its light casting a golden hue across her small kitchen. She brewed a fresh pot of coffee, but found it hard to focus on the familiar routines. Her mind churned incessantly with the echoes of the interview, a cascade of questions swirling around her ambitions and worth. The lead interviewer's words echoed back, the encouragement laced with a judgment she hadn't quite buried. "We see potential in your approach." What did that really mean? Had she merely scraped by, or had she begun a genuine transformation within an industry that historically favored the rigid over the innovative? Pulling herself back to reality, Sarah grabbed a notepad and began jotting down ideas. Inspiration coursed through her as she sketched diagrams that illustrated her vision of how finance could operate, the intertwining of numbers with narratives, data with human desire. This wasn't just an academic concept, it was personal, forged from her experiences as a mother. Each swirl of ink on the page reignited the fire that had been smoldering for so long inside her. Yet with that fire came the heat of unrelenting pressure. As she waited for a response from the company, anxiety tangled with anticipation, tainting her creative flow. What if they don't see it yet? What if they choose someone who fits the mold better? The doubts clawed at her optimism, forcing her to wrestle with old patterns of self-doubt. Deciding to combat the uncertainty, Sarah sought clarity through action. She enrolled in an online course centered on emotional intelligence in business. This was more than just a skill set. It was about equipping herself to articulate the narrative she so passionately believed in. "If I can harness this, I'll have more than just an edge. I'll have a definitive voice," she told herself as she reflected on the impossible standards she often set. During classes, she found herself energized, not just by the curriculum, but by the diverse perspectives shared by her peers. Each discussion revealed new layers of her understanding. The mechanisms of trust, emotional dynamics within teams, and the significance of empathy in leadership. She immersed herself in this knowledge, almost forgetting the lingering anxieties of the job search. In the evenings, after tucking her daughter into bed, Sarah would delve further into research, scouting companies that resonated with her values. She discovered organizations championing diversity and innovation, places where her narrative could thrive. Yet, as she sifted through opportunities, a gnawing discomfort came back. What if I'm once again pouring my heart into an application only to meet silence or rejection? That unsettling thought served as a catalyst, compelling her to proactively reach out. She began attending networking events, albeit virtually at first. Surrounded by industry newcomers and seasoned professionals, she practiced her pitch, weaving together her finance philosophy with personal anecdotes. Each interaction served like a hammer, forging her resolve through the heat of anticipation and the discomfort of vulnerability. And then, amidst these efforts, she noticed a glimmer of transformation in herself. The initial dread she felt in making connections began to dull, replaced with a burgeoning confidence. The stories, the numbers, the human essence, they all began to flow together in harmony. As her comfort grew with articulating her vision, she set up a meeting with a potential mentor, someone she admired for her work in socially responsible finance. Sarah sensed this could be pivotal, opening a doorway to insight and possibly steering her toward untapped opportunities. What if this meeting would help her directly confront the barriers she faced? The day arrived, and as she prepared her notes, anticipation mixed with anxiety. Would she receive the guidance she sought, or would the meeting reinforce her doubts? With a firm resolve, Sarah stepped into the conversation, ready to confront her fears and expand her professional horizons. However, as she entered the meeting room, she couldn't shake off the sensation of stepping into the unknown. This was where everything could either take flight or hit a wall of skepticism. Would she find the guidance that would solidify her place in the industry, or would this encounter challenge her perceptions even further? As Sarah settled into her seat, the conference room around her faded into a blur, the soft hum of conversation rendering her thoughts all the more pronounced. Her mentor, a poised woman draped in an elegantly understated blazer, looked up from her notes, offering a warm yet critical smile that beckoned Sarah to articulate her vision. Taking a deep breath, Sarah began with a recount of her journey, an awkward blend of personal anecdotes and theoretical frameworks that she had crafted. But as her voice grew steadier, so did her realization. This narrative was more than just professional posturing, it was a testament to her evolution. Her mentor leaned forward, eyes sparkling with curiosity. "You speak about intertwining human narratives with finance, but tell me, what does that practically look like? How do you plan to implement it?" It was a challenge wrapped in encouragement, and Sarah couldn't help but feel the weight of expectation. Stumbling briefly, she hesitated before responding. Her previous encounters had trained her to avoid the specifics, to linger in the abstract. Yet she was beginning to recognize the power in details, the way they could illustrate urgency and evoke emotion. "It looks like client relationships built on trust rather than numbers," she replied, each word deliberate. "For example, providing a financial plan not only based on profit metrics, but on what truly matters to a family, their dreams, their aspirations." As she spoke, she witnessed a shift in her mentor's demeanor. The initial curiosity transformed into interest, prompting deeper questions about execution and measurement. The one-on-one conversation quickly morphed into a passionate debate on the complexities of integrating empathy into frameworks often dominated by cold analytics. Sarah felt exhilaration surge within her, a confirmation she was on the right path, albeit one laden with obstacles. However, when her mentor raised an eyebrow at her lack of a clearly defined strategy, the air in the room thickened. "Empathy is indeed important, Sarah, but how do you quantify it in a space that values numbers?" It was a stark reminder of the narrow lens through which the finance industry often operated. In that moment, a question ignited within Sarah, a pervasive challenge that was still looming in the shadows of her aspirations. How would she not only convey her vision, but also ensure it was received with the weight it deserved? The fear of inadequacy clawed at her confidence. She found herself grappling with a familiar tension, the blend of innovative ideas against the harsh realities of a system resistant to change. To combat that internal storm, she leaned into the conversation. "I would implement workshops and team-building exercises that emphasize emotional intelligence through real-world scenarios," she proposed, her mind racing at the prospect of challenging her peers. "We can establish a framework not solely focused on KPIs, but on measuring employee satisfaction and client interactions. It's about redirecting the metrics of success." At this, the mentor's expression shifted once more, opening a window into a shared vision. Now that's intriguing, a bold approach. But how does that work amidst tight deadlines and traditional practices? As Sarah mulled over her response, she felt a surge of clarity. There lay an opportunity not just for her growth, but also an obligation to shift paradigms. Yet uncertainty lingered, threatening to unravel her momentum. Was she ready to champion such a radical revision of standards? The meeting ended, leaving her with a tidal wave of daunting yet exhilarating possibilities. Walking away, she felt both invigorated and weighted with a new burden. The burden of accountability, of needing to craft not just her career, but potentially reshape conversations within the industry. The next few days became a haze of reflection and action, Sarah balancing determination with introspection. She realized that true transformation required more than just a captivating vision. It demanded a robust plan and unwavering persistence in the face of inevitable skepticism. As she recounted her next steps on a digital canvas, a thought struck her: the potential impact, the significance of intent behind an established narrative. Would she be bold enough to speak her truth, challenge the status quo, and perhaps ignite change in others? That fateful morning, as she typed out a proposed workshop outline, a chilling doubt flickered. What if she was merely setting herself up for a fall? But deeper than that uncertainty lay a burgeoning resolve. She was not just crafting her career anymore. She sought to cultivate a legacy rooted in people and purpose. In the rapidly approaching future, Sarah knew the moment would come, not just for her next application or networking event, but for a confrontation with the very ideals she stood for. The edges of her ambition began to blur into an unpredictable realm. Would she find the courage to break traditional molds, or would fear once again wrap its hands around her, pulling her into stagnation? Determined, she took a deep breath, recognizing that the flight toward her vision was at the precipice of experience and revelation. In that uncertainty, a question danced in her mind, a question that would dictate her next move. How far would she go to make her narrative heard? The following days enveloped Sarah in a relentless whirlwind of anticipation and dread. The workshop she envisioned loomed over her, a beacon of what could be, yet also a daunting reminder of the risks involved. Would her colleagues embrace an initiative that strayed so far from the entrenched norms of their industry? Every nervous thought ricocheted through her mind like a ping-pong ball. On a Thursday afternoon, with the outline for her workshop taking its shape, she found herself huddled away in her office. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, hesitant. She needed to tighten her focus and instill clarity, two essential ingredients for her proposal's viability. How could she forge a path in a field resistant to upheaval? The right metrics to gauge empathy emerged as a focal point. She evidenced the constructive role emotional intelligence played in fostering not merely connection, but improved performance in finance. Aware of the data-rich environment she was targeting, Sarah set aside any notion of merely persuading her peers. She aimed for transformation. "Empathy needs quantifiable results," she muttered to herself, the bravado of her intentions waning under the weight of doubt. She began drafting potential metrics, satisfaction surveys, engagement scores, even empathy-based feedback loops. It was a start, but could it truly resonate with traditionalists? Days turned into sleepless nights. As she wrestled with the finer details of her project, discomfort formed a familiar shroud. Pushing through the intensity, she recalled the conversation with her mentor, the wide-eyed intrigue that turned skeptical and then returning to curiosity. Each retelling nudged her to stay true to herself. After all, her vision held as much promise as it did precariousness. In moments of clarity, she considered her colleagues, bright individuals often stifled by protocol. Sarah envisioned a vulnerability that invited them to engage in challenging yet rewarding discourse. To nurture that vulnerability, she would need to emerge as a guide rather than a lecturer, an ally on a shared journey toward understanding. There had to be a richer narrative than mere metrics. On a particularly dismal evening, a thunderstorm coerced Sarah into a quieter space, the warmth of a cafe. She took refuge in a corner table, ordering tea with a hint of honey, her thoughts self-replicating like wildfire. The rhythmic tapping of raindrops against the windows felt comforting yet urgent. As she stared into her steaming beverage, an ethereal notion nudged her, a call for connection amidst isolation. By the time dusk cascaded over the cafe, an imperative crystallized. She would create an environment that emphasized storytelling, encouraging colleagues to share their experiences with clients, weaving together human and financial narratives. Perhaps this emotional bridge could reshape industry dialogue. With pen poised on her notepad, she scribbled fast and furiously, ideas bleeding into one another as inspiration surged. But even amidst this newfound purpose, reflections of fear persisted. What if her colleagues dismissed the endeavor outright? Sarah visualized the skeptical glances across the table. She could almost feel them bore down upon her with palpable disinterest. What if she faced harsh critiques, or worse, mocked for her ideation? Each thought momentarily paralyzed her resolve. Yet within that tension resided a determination she nearly forgot, her drive to ignited change. If she could just muster the nerve to share her convictions, perhaps she could spark a flicker of interest. What if change happens in small steps and resonates over time? She pondered, wrestling with her vulnerability. Gaining momentum, she flipped through her notes, ready to finalize the outline for the preliminary presentation to her manager. As she pieced together each section, she realized that her endeavor wasn't merely about opening dialogues. It was about standing firm in the belief that she could bridge the chasm between numbers and narratives. Stepping back to reconsider her approach, she pondered the real question stirring at the heart of all this. How would she sustain the authenticity of her vision while navigating potential resistance? This challenging conundrum occupied her thoughts as she arranged the materials neatly on her desk. A lingering doubt whispered, was she merely delaying the moment of facing the inevitable? That evening, seated cross-legged on her couch, Sarah succumbed to introspection. The moment arrived. A challenge materialized from the depths of her contemplation. She had to confront her fears, her aspirations, and chart a course unseen. She whispered a silent vow to herself, I will not hide behind numbers. I will be the change. With fire rekindled within her, Sarah knew the next daunting step beckoned. The thought consumed her. What would be the impact of her provocation within the walls of her company? Would her colleagues rally around the idea, or would they crumble it under the weight of disbelief? That sharp edge of uncertainty sliced through her, signaling the urgency of action. As she prepared for the pivotal meeting ahead, Sarah's heart raced with the reality of impending confrontation. She understood, in that moment, that the battle was not only with her audience, but also within herself. The time had come to face the true test of her professional resolve. Would she accept the challenge of leading with authenticity, despite fear? The morning of the meeting arrived, and Sarah felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. Each breath felt heavier than the last, threaded with both anxiety and determination. As she stood before the mirror in her bedroom, she felt a flicker of self-doubt creeping in, questioning her every facet, from her attire down to her choice of words. Focus on the message, she reminded herself. She was not just presenting an idea, but a vision that could steer their industry into uncharted territory. The reflection staring back at her was not just a finance professional, but a catalyst for change. That realization stirred a quiet resilience deep within. When she walked into the conference room, the air vibrated with unspoken tension. Colleagues engaged in hushed conversations, their eyes darting toward her. She was hyper-aware of every gaze, each laden with expectation. It would be naive to think they didn't have questions, doubts that lined the very fabric of her not-so-radical proposal. As she settled in, she recalled the stories she envisioned sharing, the narrative threads that could weave an understanding not easily captured by charts and tables alone. With a deep breath, she opened the meeting, her voice steady yet infused with the fervor of her commitment. Today, I'm here not just to talk about metrics, but to discuss how we can humanize our work through empathy. The room sharpened with interest, though it was impossible to ignore the flickering brows and pursed lips. Inviting participation was central to her approach, and as she wove her ideas about storytelling with empathy metrics and engagement scores, she encouraged interruptions and questions. "What are your experiences with empathy in our field?" she asked, leaning into the discomfort of vulnerability. Halfway through her presentation, a senior colleague raised his hand, skepticism etched across his features. "With all due respect, Sarah, how do you expect us to motivate our team with these soft metrics? Aren't we losing focus on the critical numbers?" His voice carried authority, and the room settled into an anticipatory silence. Sarah's insides surged with apprehension. This was a crucial moment. She could feel every heart in the room wait for her response, but she knew this was not the time to hide or retreat. Steeling herself, she replied, "I agree that numbers are important, but they tell only half the story. I've seen firsthand how our relationships with clients are suffering. By weaving human narratives, we can translate that relationship into performance spreadsheets." There was a ripple of muted murmurs. Some were nodding, others withholding judgment. It wasn't a complete rejection, which offered her a glimmer of hope. As the meeting progressed, she drew closer to connecting with her audience, citing genuine anecdotes from her career, moments when empathy fostered deep loyalty from clients, leading to increased retention. Each story came back to the principle that empathy and financial success were not mutually exclusive. They were intertwined. The room began to shift. Where walls had been raised, windows opened up, as colleagues who once seemed indifferent started to share their thoughts, and Sarah could feel the fog of resistance begin to lift. For every counterpoint posed, she listened intently, responding thoughtfully rather than defensively. This exchange was a dance, not a duel. With the meeting nearing its conclusion, lush ideas about workshops and collaborative sessions emerged from her peers, and for the first time she felt not just a connection to her colleagues, but also an unmistakable sense of belonging. For Sarah, it was a testament that her fears, once towering obstacles, had turned into stepping stones. As the session adjourned and colleagues filtered out, one pivotal thought lodged itself in Sarah's mind. Her journey had just begun. Maybe their hesitance was not a sign of defeat, but rather the initial resistance to an inevitable transformation. Yet a deeper question began to unfurl within her. Was this newfound engagement simply a reflection of her presentation skills, or had she ignited something deeper, a thirst for change within the organization? The uncertainty stirred an exhilarating mix of anticipation and doubt, palpable as she packed her materials away. Tomorrow would bring further discussions. How would she harness this momentum? What new challenges might arise as she ventured deeper into this unmarked territory? The stakes were high, but for the first time, Sarah felt that her heart synced with the pulse of true possibility. She held on to her belief. The hardest battles often lead to the most profound victories. How far could she push this courage, and what would it bring in the face of a shifting tide? Weeks flowed into months, each one cementing Sarah's evolving place within the finance world. The initial meeting transformed into a series of workshops that filled the conference rooms of her firm. With her peers now engaged, momentum gathered as they began to embrace the uncharted territory she had cultivated with her narrative-driven approach. She marveled at the crew that had once been skeptical. They were now animated by discussions not solely focused on numbers, but on how the stories behind those numbers could illuminate paths to success. Drawing on human experiences, Sarah's ideas spilled from drafting tables to conference calls, each session anchored by shared narratives and emotional intelligence. This shift wasn't merely a ripple, it surged through the company's culture, fostering a climate of openness that spurred innovation. Outside of her workplace, the pressure of competition intensified. Promotions loomed on the horizon, threatened by the industry's conventional chains. But Sarah learned to convert fear into fuel. Each late night spent crafting new presentations imbued her with a clarity she hadn't known before. Her family rallied around her in support, her daughter suggesting ideas for her workshops, and her father reflecting on the many stories they'd shared growing up. An opportunity arose when the company announced an internal competition for team leaders to submit innovative strategies to engage a diverse clientele. Sarah recognized this as her moment, the perfect platform to consolidate her professional growth and personal evolution. The stakes were high, and doubt flickered in the corners of her mind. Yet, as she engaged in the writing process, excitement overcame her trepidation. For the proposal, Sarah aimed to synthesize the core of empathy-driven finance with a detailed financial model illustrating predictive analytics rooted in understanding client behavior. But as she poured herself into the presentation, doubt returned. Would her colleagues remember the initial skepticism? Would they once more dismiss her ideas? However, an evening walk with her daughter brought clarity that had been buried under layers of anxiety. As they meandered down the tree-lined path, her daughter spoke earnestly about understanding feelings. It struck Sarah. This was the essence of finance. The abstraction of dollars and cents should ultimately reflect human experiences and aspirations. With her new understanding, Sarah dove deep into crafting her submission. Each word etched her philosophy onto the page, forging an articulate bridge between finance and the people it serves. The final presentation felt like an amalgamation of her journey, a tapestry woven with her familial story, her motherhood, and her aspirations. The day of the competition arrived. Sarah stood before a panel comprising senior executives, her heart pounding in excitement and nerves. The faces in the audience mirrored a combination of range and skepticism, but as she began her presentation, something shifted. With each slide, she revealed not just numbers, but the significance behind them, encompassing the lives they represented. As she articulated her vision, she felt the weight of validation lifting from her shoulders. This was no longer solely about her. This proposition was a commitment to a future she wished to build not just for herself, but for her team and her family. The warmth in her voice captivated the audience, and the buzz in the room revealed connectivity she had longed for. When the presentations ended, the deliberation felt endless. Yet she remained calm, an unexpected sense of accomplishment washing over her. This experience mirrored a transformation, a definitive break from her past uncertainties. Her contribution became woven into the culture of her company, validating the uniqueness she had embraced. Eventually, as the winners were announced, Sarah's name resonated through the room with thunderous applause, echoing her acceptance and recognition. The waves of jubilation crashed upon her, but underneath, it was the reassurance that she was correct, that blending vulnerability with ambition opened doors to creativity previously stifled. In that moment, the contrasts in her life, the terrified woman staring into dusty finance texts, and the confident leader commanding the room, faded away. She had achieved more than winning a competition. She had conquered self-doubt and emerged as a champion for transformative thought in finance. As she stood on stage, joy and relief intertwining, Sarah realized she had not only paved a path for herself, but had ignited a movement toward a new financial narrative. She had proven that every individual story deserved a place within the tapestry of their journey. Standing at the threshold of her next big leap, she was no longer merely navigating her responsibilities. She was reshaping them into a purpose that would define her future. The road ahead shimmered with potential, and with that, Sarah felt a fierce sense of accomplishment and clarity. This was her time, and the journey was just beginning. Now, as we close this chapter, there's something vital you need to do. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Standing at the threshold of her next big leap, she was no longer merely navigating her responsibilities. She was reshaping them into a purpose that would define her future. The road ahead shimmered with potential, and with that, Sarah felt a fierce sense of accomplishment and clarity. This was her time, and the journey was just beginning. Now, as we close this chapter, there's something vital you need to do. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.